Before the arrival of European guns and the Atlantic slave trade, African slavery was something else entirely. In many societies, enslaved people were war captives or debtors, integrated slowly into families, communities, and even citizenship. Their bondage, while real, was not permanent. It was a system with rules, limits, and pathways to freedom. But the arrival of European traders in the 15th and 16th centuries and their demand for captives radically altered the culture of the region. In West Africa, the balance of power began to shift. Guns turned petty kings into warlords. Captives became currency. Raiding replaced diplomacy. And over the next 2 centuries, this relentless foreign demand helped reshape the political map of the region. New coastal kingdoms emerged. Others expanded or collapsed under the weight of war and trade. After the fall of older empires like Mali and Songhai, and the inward turn of kingdoms like Benin, a new kind of African state emerged along the Atlantic frontier. These were not traditional empires of tribute, trade, and diplomacy. In the era of transatlantic slavery, 2 more West African powers emerged as fierce military states and major slave suppliers: the Oyo Empire and the Kingdom of Dahomey. They were militarized kingdoms, forged in the age of guns and captives, reshaped by European greed and the economics of human trafficking. In the savannas of Yorubaland, Oyo rose on horseback, its cavalry sweeping across the interior. To the west, Dahomey forged a slave empire, fusing ritual, violence, and monarchy into a terrifying machine of conquest. The empires of Oyo and Dahomey did not begin as slaving giants. Their rise was shaped first by the need for defense, and only later by ambition, conquest, and greed. Oyo developed out of the Yoruba civilization and initially expanded to protect itself from northern rivals like the Nupe. Its relocation to the savannah gave it access to horses and cavalry, a powerful defensive advantage. But with European guns and gold entering the region, Oyo's defensive posture evolved into imperial expansion. War became profitable, captives became currency, and soon, Oyo's cavalry rode not to protect, but to raid. Dahomey emerged in the 1600s under similar pressures, surrounded by larger, more established rivals like Alida and Wida. Its early kings centralized power to survive, but once strong enough, Dahomey flipped from prey to predator, launching aggressive campaigns to conquer neighboring cities, control coastal ports, and dominate the slave trade. Its kings institutionalized warfare, ritual sacrifice, and military training, turning the kingdom into a machine for export. In both cases, European traders played a central role. Their relentless demand for enslaved labor and their willingness to supply guns in return created a new economic reality. States had to raid or be raided. War became not just a tool of defense, but the core of political survival. These weren't passive players. They were aggressive, expansionist kingdoms that used the slave trade to arm themselves, dominate rivals, and fuel powerful regional empires. Each developed its own brutal model for supplying captives to European traders, reshaping the region and fueling the transatlantic trade on an even greater scale. The Oyo Empire, based in what is now southwestern Nigeria, rose to power in the 1600s and reached its peak in the 18th century. Its strength came not from coastal trade, but from the north, where it built an inland empire connected to the Savannah and Sahel. One of Oyo's most powerful rulers, Alafin Abiodun, reigned mid to late 1700s, presided over the empire during its commercial peak. Under his rule, Oyo expanded aggressively, using cavalry forces to raid neighboring kingdoms like Nupe, Bariba, and Borgu. These campaigns were designed not just to conquer, but to capture. Thousands of people were seized in Oyo's wars and sold as slaves through ports like Porto Novo, Lagos, and Badagry. Oyo didn't need to control the coast directly. It ruled through client kings, allies, and tribute networks. Local rulers supplied captives in exchange for political protection or faced invasion. The empire became a military commercial complex. Slaves were the engine, and guns were the fuel. Oyo traded human beings to the Portuguese, Dutch, and later the British, receiving firearms, cakes of gunpowder, cloth, and luxury goods in return. Oyo's rulers used this wealth to sponsor ceremonies, maintain loyalty, and wage more war. By the late 1700s, internal divisions and rebellion weakened the state. Oyo's decline was not just a military defeat, it was a political unraveling. A system once admired for its balance between monarchy and council fell victim to its own ambition. But this unraveling did not happen in isolation. The European demand for slaves and the guns they offered in exchange had helped militarize Oyo in the first place. European trade created incentives for conquest and captives. The king's attempt to tighten control threatened the council's own role in managing that trade. When they revolted, it wasn't just political, it was economic. During the reign of Alafin Aole, those tensions exploded. Determined to centralize royal power, Aole clashed with the Oyo Mesi, the council of chiefs who held the power to check the king. When they turned against him, Aole was isolated, humiliated, and forced to take his own life. But not before he cursed the empire and those who had betrayed him. His death marked the beginning of Oyo's collapse. Ilorin, once a loyal vassal, rebelled and joined with Fulani Muslim forces to attack its former overlords. The empire, weakened by civil war and over-reliance on the slave trade, could no longer defend itself. The empire collapsed under a system strained by foreign influence, internal greed, and a dependency on a trade that turned governance into warfare. The Kingdom of Dahomey, located in present-day Benin, was one of the most aggressive and infamous slave trading states in African history. Founded in the early 1600s, Dahomey's power came from organized warfare, centralized rule, and a violent obsession with capturing humans. Its most ambitious ruler, King Geso, reigned 1818 to 1858, fully militarized the kingdom and turned slave raiding into state policy. Geso waged near-constant war on neighboring peoples, especially Yoruba communities and rivals to the north, capturing thousands and selling them at the slave ports of Ouida and Porto Novo. The kingdom ran like a machine. Geso built an economy where slavery was the foundation of the state. Markets thrived on the sale of captives. European merchants supplied guns and goods, and captives were paraded, sacrificed, or sold. Public ceremonies celebrated victory and domination. Even the royal palace was built with the labor and profits of the slave trade. Dahomey's army was unique in another way. It included an elite corps of female warriors, often called the Dahomey Amazons. These women were trained to kill and capture, and they played a key role in slave raids. Dahomey became infamous in Europe, but European powers continued to trade. British abolitionists pressured Geso to stop. He refused. Geso's son, Glele, later inherited a kingdom rich in blood, but strained by abolition and diplomatic isolation. By the late 1800s, the French conquered Dahomey and ended its independence. But the kingdom's legacy as one of West Africa's most violent and organized slave states remains. Oyo and Dahomey were not victims of European slavery. They were architects of it in their regions. Their leaders made strategic decisions to trade in flesh, to build armies on blood, and to expand through captivity. Their stories are not about innocence. They're about power, ambition, and complicity, and they help us understand the full truth of how Africa was shaped, not just by colonizers, but by those who colluded in the trade that transformed the world. Further south, new coastal powers emerged, like Bonny, Calabar, and the Igbo hinterlands, built not by conquest, but by control of the ports that fueled the trade. While Oyo and Dahomey built power through warfare and conquest, other regions participated in entirely different ways, especially the Igbo-speaking territories and the port cities of the Niger Delta. Here, political authority was fragmented. The Igbo hinterlands were largely decentralized, with power organized through kinship, councils, and local village assemblies. This lack of centralized military authority made the region vulnerable to both internal and external raiding. Rival clans, shifting alliances, and internal disputes were exploited by neighboring groups and coastal intermediaries, often resulting in the capture and sale of individuals into slavery. European traders, eager for captives, established strongholds along the coast and forged close ties with local elites. These relationships gave rise to port cities like Bonny and Calabar, which grew rapidly in wealth and influence. Their rulers were not traditional kings, but merchant oligarchies, powerful families who controlled trade routes, shipping contracts, and access to European firearms. Over time, these cities became major hubs of the transatlantic slave trade. By the 18th century, Bonny and Calabar alone were responsible for the export of more than 1 million enslaved Africans. Slave markets became formal institutions, complete with taxes, customs officers, and European warehouses filled with goods for barter. The impact on Igbo society was devastating. Entire villages were depopulated, kinship networks collapsed. People lived in fear of kidnapping, not just from foreign invaders, but from neighbors, relatives, or even local leaders profiting from betrayal. Unlike Oyo and Dahomey, the coastal kingdoms of the Niger Delta did not maintain standing armies, but they held immense economic power. Their influence came not from conquest, but from their ability to control who reached the European ships and what prices they would pay. Guns, rum, cloth, and metal goods poured in from Europe, fueling local rivalries and shifting the balance of power. The Igbo experience reveals a different face of the slave trade, not one of kings and conquest, but of fragmented communities drawn into a vast and violent marketplace. It shows how even societies without centralized authority could become deeply embedded in global systems of exploitation, and how the lure of profit could override kinship, culture, and tradition. Oyo, Dahomey, Bonny, Calabar. These names now stand in the shadow of what they helped build, a global slave economy that reshaped 3 continents. These were not passive victims of foreign intrusion. They were players in a deadly exchange, but neither were they equal partners. Their power grew, then collapsed, under the weight of European demand. This is not a story of simple blame, but of tragic entanglement. The slave trade was not just something done to Africa. It was something done through Africa, and its legacy remains today in the fractured borders, weakened institutions, and haunted memory of entire regions. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue uncovering the hidden truths of history. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more deep dives into the past. See you in the next video.